So, welcome back, Creative Maestros. It is my humble pleasure to represent one of my favorite souls on the planet, Mikael Yisrael, and he is going to grace us with his Creative Maestro abilities so you can go out and create. So, thank you, Mikael.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
I appreciate you, brother. I really appreciate you sharing your platform, having me here, taking a trip out to come visit us.
Absolutely.
Catch up. It's always a pleasure.
Appreciate that. So a little background about Mikael. We also went to high school together.
Yes, sir.
The petty school. So shout out to
Viva.
that. Shout out to that. But also, Mikael has a very firm background in education. His professional career has been revolving around helping people not only achieve their dreams by getting into either secondary or collegiate education, but also discovering the nuances behind what it takes to stand out on a college application. Do you want to give us a little background about that?
Yeah, man. It's funny. It's funny. It really is funny because I would categorize myself as someone who hates school.
I understand that.
Like hate it. Like I have
Right.
a huge disdain for school.
Absolutely.
However, since the tender age of 3, I have been in institutions, either as a student or working or being a student while working at an institution.
Absolutely.
Since the age of 3, I have not had anything else but being involved in the school. That's
Okay.
it. So upon graduation from my collegiate level, I went straight back to Petty, actually, and worked there for 3 years. And then from there, I went to higher education, and now I'm back at an independent school. So all of my experiences has been within an educational institution.
Right.
So much so that I need to ask myself why.
Okay.
For someone who has such a huge disdain for school, why have I spent and dedicated my whole career thus far, my whole life, in educational institutions?
Right.
And I think it's because, if you want to quote Gandhi, who says you should be the change in the world that you wish to see.
Absolutely.
I didn't like a lot of things when I was coming up in school.
Upset with the status quo.
I was
right?
upset with the status quo. I didn't like schooling in the way that it polices the bodies of people, tells you where you need to be, when you need to be there, how you need to behave. They really police your body. So much so that I used to leave away messages on my AOL Instant Messenger back in the day.
On the AIM game.
That said, the AIM game that said I'm out at academic prison. So that's pretty much what it was. But I realized that there was a huge difference between schooling and education.
Okay.
And once I realized that I need to give back to those who might be like me, who might lose their way in this process called schooling, and really make them hip to the fact that there's something called education that they need to delve deeper into in order for them not only know themselves, but take what they learn about themselves and share it with the greater world. And I think that's what you're doing right now, honestly, on this platform, which I'm so appreciative of sharing with you. So with that being said, I think the stuff that I do now is really me trying to speak to those who might be like me, who might think that school is not the way, who might given up on education because it prohibits them from really tapping into who they are as a person.
Sure.
And really inspiring them for the next generation or what they want to do moving forward in their lives. So I want to help folks realize what their passions are. I want to help folks realize that you don't have to go to a particular school in order for you to be successful. I want folks to understand that, there's just certain things that you have to do the way that the system is set up. However, you can still be you and not lose yourself in that process.
I feel like that's very important for all of our creative maestros out there. And one of the terms that I've recently come up with that I think Mikael embodies the most is that you are a scientific artist. You really do your homework in terms of discovering the nuances of every avenue that you tackle. And then you also give yourself the space to be an artist in that environment, which I think is incredibly important because usually, and this actually is a segue to my next question for you, is that some people will argue that maybe schooling is necessary more than education because it teaches people, time management skills. What would your response be to that?
I mean, there's a lot of different things that can teach you time management skills.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I think Mark Twain said it best when he said, "I never let my schooling interfere with my education." I think there's a number of different ways that you can really learn how to manage your time. For example, if you have parents who teach you chores,
right,
or they teach you that you have to make your bed in the morning. I have nothing against routine. I have nothing against scheduling. I have nothing against time management. But the funny thing is that sometimes if someone, let's just say school, is trying to teach you time management, but they're giving you a project that you can't really buy into. Okay. They're giving you an assignment that you really don't care for. You might become, or it might breed, procrastination.
Happens a lot, sure.
Why? Because it's boring. Why? Because you might have so many ideas, but guess what? They don't want those ideas.
They don't want to hear those.
I think about all the English papers I had to write, which is completely subjective. Completely subjective. But depending on your teacher, you might not get a good grade because they're looking for a different response.
It's true.
So when it comes to time management, I'd better manage my time if I was able to be creative and able to utilize my time the way I want to utilize my time. I think I'd be a better time manager. But when you tell me that I have to do something a certain way, and maybe it seems counterintuitive, but when you tell me I have to do something a certain way, that's when I might struggle with some time commitments. So if you give me a hard deadline, I'll get it done. But even if I can start 2 months in advance, I might not start it if I'm not interested in it. If I have limitations, or if you're trying to stifle my creativity, if you're telling me that I have to be confined in this box, so to speak, I might not get to it till the day before. And because we're so creative, and because we have opportunities to really tap into our subconscious and tap into the things that we've observed on a daily basis, or maybe we've been planning things in our head, it might be easy to get things done. But again, I think the way that you can breed good time management skills is by giving folks the opportunity to have autonomy, ownership over their time, over the things that they need to get accomplished.
Absolutely. And Mikael brings up an excellent point in terms of giving yourself the space to be creative, because I find that when we I guess change our perspective on things and follow someone else, that actually it takes away a part of us that we actually believe in the most, which I think is very pivotal when you want to be creative. And I feel like when we do that, it's not necessarily great for the whole creative process.
I definitely agree with that, because there's plenty of times when, in school in particular, you're almost in a game of I guess maybe checkers, right? You're trying to anticipate the next move. What's the teacher's move? And you're trying to figure out exactly how does that person want me to think.
Right.
Why? Because you're not chasing the knowledge. You're not chasing the fact that this will make me a better person if I learn it. You're chasing the grades. You're chasing the accolades. You want the awards, because we've been taught that good grades, whether it's straight A's, whether it's getting the honor roll, whether it's making the dean's list, that's what's going to propel me forward. That's what makes me successful. But that shouldn't be the case. The case should be we should have different metrics that really measure what success truly is.
Right.
Do you have an original idea? Is that something that someone's never thought about before? Have you taken an idea that's been explored before and expanded upon it? Have you challenged an idea that's already been put forth? But no, we're so used and so accustomed and conditioned to trying to figure out what someone wants from us as opposed to doing what we want for ourselves.
Absolutely. And we actually talked about this before over dinner, where America used to be the epicenter of innovation during the time of Nikola Tesla and Einstein, where people would their profession was to literally be an inventor, and that's all they would do, and they would get all the benefits of their own patent that they would invent themselves. But now the modern business model has the smartest people joining places like Google or Samsung and developing patents for them, and they're benefiting from from their ingenuity more than that individual person would.
And that to me is a crime in a lot of different ways.
Oh, it's definitely a crime. Unforgivable.
And it's like, you're plugged into the matrix, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And how do you break that mold, though? I think it starts with people like you.
Oh.
in a lot of different ways, for real. In a lot of different ways that have a type of platform or a channel that encourages folks to be free thinkers, to imagine possibilities that are outside of what they see on a daily basis, to imagine opportunities which might be perceived as challenges, but to imagine opportunities that might propel their ideas forward in a way that will be palatable to the masses,
right.
in a way that will be consumed by those who need it most. And I think that, it's unfortunate that we sometimes get into this rat race, particularly in America. It seems like it's an arms race to be who's the next person to get the most likes on Facebook,
right.
or who's the next person to really get a lot of followers on Instagram. I mean, I can't tell you how many times at school where I work, folks are just so inundated with so much nonsense.
Consumed.
They're just consumed with so much nonsense.
Like consumers.
Yes, like consumers, exactly. And it's like, so I thought about something before, and it's funny because I thought about this when I was in college. And I was thinking about something called like educational obesity. I never really thought it out too much, right?
I like that.
Never really thought it out too much, because I know this, there might be some doctors watching or whatever. Like you're wrong. Whatever. It's just a thought. Don't stand for my creativity. But anyway, with that being said, educational obesity. So we consume so much garbage. We consume so much nonsense.
A lot of distractions.
That our creativity, our brains, are malnourished. And there's side effects of that. We could be morbidly obese in a number of different ways because of all the nonsense that we're consuming, all the junk that we're taking in. And our minds are now really unhealthy. Very unhealthy. So it's almost like an educational obesity thing. That being said, there's a lot of students that I see on a daily basis who are, one, overworked, they're overscheduled, and they're overwhelmed. And that does not allow them time for reflection. It doesn't allow them time for creativity. It doesn't allow them time to do something that might be something that they're not going to get graded for, something that's going to be a passion of theirs, something that they just do because they're happy when they do it. There's no space for that. And that is, I think, a reason why we might not be as innovative as we used to be. I think that might be a reason why we don't have patents as much as we used to be. I mean, we're all trying to do other things that people have done before. No one's really trying to follow their own path, but a channel like Creative Maestro might, put people in the right direction.
That's definitely the goal. And one of my, I would say, hypothetical mentors would be George Washington Carver, because one of the things he prided himself on was to go into his workshop and just have fun and play and create. And that's things that Nikola Tesla did. He would imagine things and then try to bring them to life using his creativity. And I think that's very important. You brilliantly talked about the point of giving a creative soul space to create, and a society that promotes people to respond immediately on social media without thinking about what they're saying. And I feel like Twitter, especially for professional athletes, or even not just professional athletes but celebrities, it's really a problem, because they're just responding to things based upon emotion. They're not thinking about what they say before they say it. And that's becoming the culture. So now other people are doing it, because at the end of the day, they're role models. So what it takes to be creative is that you really have to deliberate with yourself. You really have to wrestle the idea with yourself and think about it from every single angle before you even respond. So if we think about people like Leonardo da Vinci, he would conceptualize a concept for months, if not years. Now, granted, with our instant society, we may not have that long, but you can at least take a week to respond, at least take a week to deliberate on it before you put something out into the internet that can't be deleted ever again.
No, I totally agree. And I think that nowadays, because we have talk about Generation Z now. Generation Z, they're into instant gratification. They want everything now, right now. So, and I think that sometimes creativity is about patience.
Absolutely.
It's really about failure. It's really about not being afraid to fail. And I can't remember the quote, and I don't want to butcher it, so I won't try to quote it directly, but it's about failing again, and failing better. You really have to keep trying. There's a process to this. But again, because a lot of folks don't want to stay the course, they want to take that time to really put in the work, do their due diligence. They might try it one time, be like, oh, it didn't work. They're not going to reassess it. They're not going to try to approach it from a different angle. They're just going to give up on their dream. And again, they don't have mentors. They don't have folks who are like encouraging them or pushing them forward or cheering them on to really pursue their passions. Because again, the question becomes, what's the return on my investment?
Right.
Do the ends justify the means?
Right.
What Ivy League institution am I going to get into? It's no need for that. My thing is, you need to chase what your passion is, and everything else will follow. Easier said than done, for sure. Because I'm not foolish. There's so many things that go into that. There's a value proposition that's presented, but there's also risk. There's also challenges and obstacles that a person has to overcome, and there's some realities that you have to accept if you want to live that life of a creative maestro. However, if you put in the work, you put in the time, the end effect will be beautiful.
Absolutely. And just imagine this on your own creative maestro. Exactly what Mikael said. If you spend all of your energy working for yourself and researching things that you're actually interested in, that you're passionate about, and then the result that you conjure is going to be 100% for you, not 70% for a company that can benefit from your expertise and knowledge and ability. All that goes to you. So just consider that next time you're in a board meeting and you have an amazing idea. Like, sure, it'll get you, it'll help you out the corporate ladder, but the corporate ladder still has limits. And
you have to ask yourself, what are you climbing towards? Who are you climbing for?
Right.
And there's some questions that we're so afraid to ask questions, and it goes back to the whole schooling aspect. Are we even taught to ask questions?
Exactly.
Or are we taught to be, there's a book called Excellent Sheep. Are we taught to be excellent sheep? Are we taught to just do X, Y, and Z without questioning it? Are we supposed to follow the masses? I don't think we're taught to question. We don't have critical consciousness enough to actually question whether this is right for me or if it's wrong for me, or whether it's even something that we should be doing or embarking on. And I think that's something that we need to continue to, I guess, beat the drum and let folks know that, hey, this is something that you should be doing, not just for me, not just for you, not just for them, but for everyone. Because I think the more and more we can ask critical questions, the more and more we can get great innovation and responses to everything that society might need right now.
Absolutely. And you bring up a fantastic point. I feel like the most undervalued aspect of our young adult lives is the power to decide. You can decide to take something positively or negatively. And which is the difference between, conductive criticism and you taking it just as criticism. So you get defensive and you're like, oh, well, you do X, Y, and Z. That's not the point of my statement. I'm actually trying to help you so you can actually, so you can actually not only thrive, but even benefit even more than you actually consciously see right now. Like that's the point of me talking. Like I'm not going to waste my time telling you something about yourself unless I honestly believe if you improve that one part, then you would be able to do incredible things. And
I totally agree with that. I think what you just said is critical because I think that the way that we're able to be the most creative, if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. If we allow ourselves, and I think any artist would say that.
Yes.
If we allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough where we're okay and open to constructive criticism, where we're okay and open to feedback, where we're okay and open to realize and fully embrace that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
We don't. In fact, we should be having conversations with multitudes of people because guess what? They come from different backgrounds, different lived experiences, diverse perspectives, and that's just going to help us figure out what it is that we need to do and help us be more innovative and creative. But I think if we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable, then there will be no growth. You will remain stagnant, and then you'll just be on that hamster wheel, going back and back and back and back and back, and nothing will move forward.
Absolutely. And that's literally the purpose of the creative interview series is to speak to different people, and so we can learn from people like you and how to be inspired in different ways and learn how to be creative in different ways in different lanes. I think that is critical. Absolutely.
You know what I wish someone would have told me when I was younger, and I think what you're doing is fantastic, phenomenal. Honestly, you need to You need to like his videos. You need to subscribe right now, because what he's doing is brilliant in a lot of different ways, because you are a new age life coach in a lot of different ways. And in some cases, dare I say it, you might be a father figure for a lot of people who don't have one. Or you might be that mentor who tells someone who has a creative idea, go forth with it, as opposed to the person who's on the other side saying, nah, that's not going to work, G. You know what I mean? So with that being said, I think that situations like this, let people know they're not crazy. Let people know that their ideas, the sky's the limit. And lets people know that they need to continue to pursuing their passions, and everything else will fall into place. Everything else will fall into place because, as you say, press play on your imagination, right? I think there's a lot of times that when I was growing up, I mean, I wanted to be a forensic scientist.
Okay.
I definitely did. I was in the bathroom playing with toothpaste, mixing shampoos and everything. I'm glad I didn't blow anything up. However, I think sometimes we might be stifled by that because it's like, boy, what you doing? Yeah. You better not be using all that toothpaste. We gotta brush our teeth around here. Like, I get that. I totally get that. But there needs to be some type of support that will allow the individual to really, take that a step further and see exactly what you're doing and explore it a little bit more so, as opposed to, brother, listen, you ain't paying no money around here. We ain't got enough money for toothpaste. Stop playing with shampoo. Shampoo go in your hair. Like, I get it. But we need that type of stuff. And I think what you're providing for your viewers is that you're pushing them out of their comfort zone. You're pushing them out of complacency. And you're telling them that their idea is worth it and that they're worth it. And that they should go and explore their worthwhile idea.
Absolutely. And you saw and really loved the interview I had with Nasheed.
Yes.
And the fact that he's a creative risk taker as well as yourself. And the point of that interview was to really believe in yourself and really put yourself out there, because when you make that conscious decision to put something out there for other people to digest, your best comes out. And that's the most important. When you're a creative risk taker, your mind, body, and soul always backs you up. They will never let you down, which is something that we all should strive to try and do more, is to engage our mind, body, and creative spirits, because they are incredible entities on their own.
For sure. First and foremost, shout out to She. Part of my back, you know what I mean? But first and foremost, shout out to She. Definitely appreciate the work and everything that he's doing, man. Just a ball of energy. I think that he's a great example of how you should just be yourself.
Absolutely.
Point blank, period. You shouldn't try to be the next man. You shouldn't be trying to follow what someone else is doing, who's relevant, who's trending right now. Be you. And whoever follows you are the exact people who should be following you. And please believe, if you keep putting in the work, everything's going to work out well. And some folks are doing it for all the wrong reasons. Some folks are trying to chase money, they're trying to chase that paper, they're trying to stack, whatever.
Right.
Racks on racks. They're trying to do whatever they want to do, right? But if you're chasing it for the right reason, because you're really into it, you know what I mean? You'll be good. You'll definitely be good. And then from that, I think other opportunities open. So once you start to chase your creative passions, other windows, other opportunities will be presented to you.
Absolutely.
Because why? You're focusing on things that are important to you. You're focusing on things that you've always had in your heart, as opposed to trying to follow what the next current trend is going to be, or what the next come up is going to be in the world. I think that's just something that folks need to just really be in touch with themselves a little bit more so. I mean, I think I talk about, when I talk to students, because I'm a college counselor right now, but when I talk to students, I tell them about, they always ask me, how do I distinguish myself in the process? I know it's always corny advice, but when I worked in higher education, I used to do information sessions. And that question would come up too. And I would tell folks, the minute you try to distinguish yourself, that's already a false step. So we take advice from our good friend Dr. Seuss, who said, today you are you, that's truer than true. There's no one alive more youer than you.
Word.
Be you.
Yeah.
And you just being you, you're already distinguished. So don't try to distinguish yourself. You're already distinguished. Be true to yourself. Have that conversation with yourself. And I always say, before you're a prospective student, you have to be an introspective student. But some people are a little scared. They don't really want to spend time with themselves. And that's a whole nother different conversation about people not wanting to spend time with themselves because they're either insecure, or they don't like themselves, or they just don't think that they're strong enough because they've had all these messages that tell them they're nothing, or tell them that they shouldn't be creative. But once you stay true to your passion, and sometimes it's hard to find that, but hey, once you find that, listen to that inner voice. Listen to it. And then hopefully they have people like you who keep telling them, listen to your inner voice. Listen to your inner voice, and everything else will come after that.
Absolutely. I mean, intuition is a very powerful thing. And in our most recent Creative Maestro video on related to Star Wars, one of the Maestro tips that we came up with was don't react to the world, make the world react to you, which is so paramount when being creative and being yourself, because one of the things that we actually talked about this earlier, that we all consciously make a decision to do is to follow the world in some aspect at a certain age. And I feel like that is when the child becomes a young adult, and the young adult tries to follow something else as opposed to staying true to themselves, mostly because we're learning that our ideas don't have enough wisdom behind them to be validated, which I think is a little bit, naive, at the same time, because there are a lot of people who have amazing ideas even as children, but they get discounted because they're children. So I think it's important to listen and consider and actually contemplate all ideas, no matter where they come from, because a child's perspective on things is different than an adult's perspective who has been following for, let's say, decades. So they're seeing things differently than other people are. And I feel like the most creative people as adults are usually to quote Ursula, the creative adult is the child who refuses to die. So that, right from yes.
Wow, that's so powerful. It really is. It's really powerful for a number of different reasons. And when you were talking about that, I think there's a number of things that I try to instill not only in myself but also in my students and everyone who I come in contact with. So, if you think about investing, right? If you think about having stocks and bonds, they always tell you the smart thing to do is to diversify your portfolio.
Right.
That being said, a concept that I've been thinking about, or a concept that I try to share with folks, is that you should diversify your thought portfolio. So with that being said, you shouldn't read just one thing or from one author. You shouldn't just watch just one news outlet. I don't care whether you're a Republican, I don't care whether you're Democrat, Independent, it doesn't matter.
Tea Party, doesn't matter.
It does not matter. You need to watch, listen, consume, absorb everything across the spectrum. That way you have a diverse thought portfolio. You might have some people that you really jive with. Well, find someone who might be their adversaries. So that way you can see what they're thinking about too. And that just breeds more creativity, because please believe they're all approaching things from different angles.
Right.
And the more and more you can get that 360 perspective, the more informed you'll be. So I think that's something I always try to preach to folks. And maybe preach is rough, but I always try to let folks know that this is something that you should take a look at and think about, because the more and more you can diversify your thought, you still know who you are, but the more and more you can diversify your thought, you can get more introspection on who you are, why you're that, and be more firm in your convictions. Or, maybe think about, hey, I never thought about it that way. I'm still me, but I never thought about it that way.
Right.
And I think that allows you to be a little bit more creative, and at least appeal more so to other folks if that's what you're looking to do.
Absolutely. And one of the things we actually talked about prior to this was creative communication.
Yes.
And imagine that you're trying to communicate with someone and there is a language barrier. You're going to be as creative as possible to not only understand each other, but make sure that the message you're sending is as positive as possible. So you don't want someone to be offended by what you say, especially if that's not what you mean. So creative communication at the end of the day is about being able to understand what the other person is saying. Exactly so. So in terms of competition that you brilliantly brought up, and one of the examples that we honed in on was LeVar Ball and his determination and will to compete at the best level, which is to use everything in his power to help promote his sons.
And here you have, which, I think that all the narrative that's being built around him, his family, etc., has been more so negative than positive.
Right.
And you have to ask yourself why. You see a guy who's a father. He's in his son's lives, has been 3 boys. All of them are doing successful. Don't worry about what happened in China, but all of them are being successful, right? And he's taking care of his wife with an illness, right?
Yeah, most people don't know that she has. That's usually,
just
not
glossed
talked
over.
about.
Just glossed over. But you have a family man, a real family man, who's, unapologetic. And him being a family man, and him taking care of his kids, and him taking care of his wife, and him just being that patriarch that would have been acceptable or palatable to other folks if he came in a different package. However, I think a lot of folks are, really, really questioning him in the sense of, who does he think he is? Why does he think he can not conform? Why does he think he can create his own avenue to get what he wants for his children, what he wants for himself? Who is he to say he wants his own brand? Why is he coming out with all these own shoes? What's this big baller brand thing? What is all this about? And I think all those questions come from a couple of things. One, some folks might not be able to grasp the fact that he's doing his own thing.
Right.
He's being a creative maestro. Others might not be able to grasp the fact that, wow, he's breaking conformity. He's not being within the system. He's creating his own system. And will that jeopardize that for other folks who are coming up who would have been in the system, which would be putting money in my pocket, and he's just going to take it and run with it. So I think some folks might feel threatened by that. And some folks, because of that, are trying to do their best to just bash what he's doing.
I could definitely see that, and I definitely agree with that, because I'm of the mindset, especially as being an athlete in high school, that I'm always going to take the side of the players as opposed to the institution, because the players at the end of the day are risking everything for their family, themselves, and also the league that they're in to propel it forward. And certain leagues like the NFL don't have guaranteed contracts. I think I don't know if the NHL has this as well, but as far as I know, the NFL is the only professional institution that does not have guaranteed contracts, yet it's the only institution that guarantees the most injury.
Which is crazy to me, because for me, I've been fortunate enough to be in positions that I had a salaried job. So my money was guaranteed.
Right.
I can't imagine showing up to work and not being guaranteed money. This is their job. This is their livelihood. I cannot imagine showing up to work every day, going to my desk, doing the things that I have to do, and go home saying, you know what, I might not get that money that I was supposed to get today. Like, that's crazy. On top of that, they're risking life and limb. That being said, my background is also in higher education. And I'm a huge proponent for the scholar athlete. I have issues, though, however, with the NCAA in the sense of amateurism.
Absolutely.
How they can profit off of a lot of students. And let's be real, particularly when you talk about the NBA, right? They have to go to college for what? For what? They're going to go to college for 1 year? For what?
Ben Simmons, we're in Philly, so.
They're going to risk injury.
Yes.
Which might derail their career or end it. They're not getting money from it, and people can argue about scholarships and say that they're having an opportunity at the collegiate level, but they're not. It's not proportionate. They're not getting paid for their likeness, and they're not graduating with a degree, at least once they get into that market. And I have issues with that. So again, I'm all about, like you said, being a proponent for the athlete, particularly with systems that are designed to profit off the athlete. While the athlete can't profit off of their own likeness. And I have huge fundamental issues with that. I would like to see, and I wonder what's going to happen with the NCAA moving forward. I know there's other class action suits and things that are starting to come up into play. We shall see what happens with that.
Definitely. And one of the things that I'm not sure if you guys know, but in Europe, you can be a professional at 16 years old. So you can make a living off of your craft at 16, as opposed to do the AAU or the travel sport business model, which tons of companies like Nike and Adidas profit off of, and then they profit off you even more in college. And the collegiate institutions, college athletics is a business. I mean, academics at that level is a business as well, but collegiate athletics is a major business. And if you go to places like Alabama who do not have a professional sports team, college athletics is their professional sports team.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's funny, so much so that, they spend much money to get the top talent to recruit them there. So much so that if you think about the NCAA for football, their college playoffs. So if you talk about the football playoffs, people refer to it as the Alabama Bowl.
Right.
Because it's mostly teams from Alabama that are going to be in it for the most part, because they have so much talent that goes there. But it is really important, particularly if you're thinking about, as we mentioned earlier, about being a person who can think for themselves, who could be a free thinker. It's tough when the system is set up for you to do one thing or the other. And if you don't do the one thing you're supposed to do, you won't be able to have a livelihood beyond your college career.
Right.
You're going to be either blacklisted, blackballed, or whatever the case you want to call it. But you have to, in some ways, your hands are tied and you're forced to conform, or you're forced to go through that pipeline of that system. So that's why folks like LeVar Ball, who are being very creative, who are really using their minds to think outside the box and understanding the consumer and understand all the different outlets and understanding that America is just one place and thinking globally. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
It is. It's definitely an inspiration for me because, as I'm sure you know, I have extreme wanderlust. So my mind is always viewing the rest of the world. Like, what is the rest of the world doing outside of America? Which I think is important. Is important for most Americans. Who's like, okay, what is if you're from the Northeast? What is the South doing? What is the West Coast doing? What is the Midwest doing? What is the Middle East doing? What is China doing? What is South America doing? What is Africa doing that we could be doing a whole lot better? And by thinking like that, we can also think about ways to improve those places.
And those are very important questions. I think about it from an educational lens. We need to continue to look at places like Finland. We need to. Why? Because one, their teachers are actually a valued profession. They get paid top dollar.
Right.
Like CEOs here in America.
Exactly, right.
They're innovative in their approach to education. They don't give too much homework. They don't overschedule and, just overwhelm students. I think they have innovative approaches to learning. And I think that the more and more us as Americans can think globally to really, humble ourselves and realize that we don't have all the answers and understand there are other civilizations that are older than us. We can really start to gain the knowledge and go back to Africa and see exactly what they've been doing for years. Go to Europe and see what they've been doing in different places. And then take what's good and then discard the stuff that's not. What works for us. But I think that something has to give because the way that things are moving, particularly as it pertains to education, I can't say we're making much progress. In some areas, sure. There's always those stories where you say, look at this school, look at this district. But as a nation, we're falling far behind.
I could definitely see that, and we actually talked about this earlier. With just one simple mandate, America could really catapult itself even further how we used to be during our innovative period with Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein. So if America, this is for all the educators, if America were to mandate that each American were to learn Spanish, French, and some type of dialect of the West Indies, we would unite the Americas just like that overnight.
Which I think is a fantastic thought. And I think one of the things I've learned being in education is that folks love to talk about thoughts.
Right.
They love to talk about theory, but they never commit to the practice.
They never act on it, right?
They never act on it. So I think that we need to continue to push folks to do that. And also, you have a lot of xenophobia. You have a lot of folks who say, if you don't speak my language, I can't talk to you, or whatever the case may be, which is crazy. I remember when I was working at Petty, and then a student was asking me, so what happens if you have a language barrier with one of the students that you're interviewing? I was like, that's fine. We'll struggle through it together. It's not like I can speak their language. Right. They can't speak English, but I can't speak Mandarin. I don't know Cantonese. So with that being said, I'm not going to frown upon you. You don't frown upon me. We're going to struggle through this together. We're going to figure this out. But I think that creatively, and I think that again, it all has to do with ego. It all has to do with us trying to humble ourselves and really understand that, listen, this is a learning process. Life is a learning process. And you have to admit that you don't have all the answers. You need to make yourself vulnerable in order for you to have growth. And I think we can definitely grow and unite. But the question becomes, why hasn't this been done already? What's holding us back? Is there any particular reason why? Now we can assume what the issue might be or why this might not be happening. We can think about all the cost-benefit analysis of doing such a thing. But, it's something to think about.
It is something to think about and to ponder as a creative spirit, because as we said earlier, it's important to think about these things before we respond. Like, I know some people in the comment section might be, you don't know what you're talking about. And that's okay. But I would just suggest that you actually think about it and imagine all the positive possibilities that would come from these suggestions and what they could also lead to in the future. And that'll be really using your imagination, and you will become a creative maestro by doing that.
And I think that you just touched upon something that's very important. And I always ask myself this question. The reason why I think some things don't come to fruition, the reason why I think there might be some setback for certain people, is because they put profit over purpose.
Oh, right.
And there's plenty of times when, the purpose might be to unite. The purpose might be to make sure that folks are coming together to collaborate, so we can get back to being innovative, so we can get back to having patents, so we can get back to being the leader of whatever we want to lead, right?
Right.
But we want to put profit over purpose. So we lose sight of the realities of what we're trying to do, because it's not going to make us be in the black. It's going to make us in the red. Or it's not going to make us, a financial power to be dealt with.
Right.
So those are some of the things that are always in play.
And it also loses a part of ourselves, because when you compromise yourself for just monetary gain, not only does creativity go out the window, but so does your individuality. You willingly choose to conform just so you can make money, when in all actuality, if you decided to go after your passion and your actual core, you can make more money than you actually can imagine doing what you love and doing what you're already great at, using your skill set and using your creativity and your ingenuity to combine your passions and your drive into a business of your own, similar to a LeVar Ball and or better, right? And then using the platforms already established like YouTube or social media to catapult them even further, because at the end of the day, they're free. Well, they're free for now. Who knows what's going to happen after net neutrality? You might have to, on your internet or cable bill, you might have to actually pay more or pay a tax for accessing YouTube or Instagram. So who knows what will happen after that? But as of right now, go out and be an artist while we still can afford it, right?
For sure. And I mean, I think it's also important when you're thinking about your passions, when you're thinking about exploring what it is that you like to do, you have to ask yourself, am I intrinsically motivated or am I extrinsically motivated?
Right.
Is it because it's something I want to do, or is it because there's some external factor that's telling me I have to do this, or I'm going to benefit from it because they're going to give me money, etc., blah, blah, blah. Can you be bought? Can your ideas be bought? Or are you going to package it as such that you're going to control your own passions, you're going to control your own narrative, you make your own rhetoric your own reality, as opposed to someone else dictating or having their hands in your own life?
So I think it's incredibly important for everyone to realize what led you up to this point, to being creative, being innovative, and also being an independent free thinker, and not to take the path of the most traveled and dodge paths of conformity to not only be yourself, but being positive members of society. Because even though we're natural introverts, I think it's also important to share what we've learned and what we've observed from up close, but also the solutions that we've come up with, because we have a lot of good ideas that just rarely get heard, because either some of us are either too shy or don't think anyone will listen. And sometimes you just need to stand up on your on your box on the corner and just be like, listen, you know more than you think. And that's literally the purpose of the channel. Like your ideas are a lot better than the ideas that come from Nike or, you know, Coca-Cola or McDonald's. Like you guys are creative maestros yourselves, and I'm just curious, and I'm sure you guys are, how you start noticing that at a young age and how you're able to navigate through society that is always wanting you to conform.
That's a very deep, complex question. Hopefully I can provide a deep and complex answer. I think the only way that I can really address that answer appropriately is to give a little background of myself.
Okay.
So I'm from Harlem. I was born in the Bronx, raised in Harlem. Miles of welfare, ain't that a problem? That being said, I was raised in a single parent household.
Okay.
So it was just my mom, you know, was on welfare, you know, didn't have a job for a while. I think when I was in kindergarten, that's when she first got a job with the post office. But I was the youngest of 4 from my mom's kids, and the only boy.
Wow. Okay.
Youngest of 4, only boy. Blessing and a curse. However, I think in that space, and being introverted, I found the need to listen,
Okay.
to be patient, to observe. And I guess that was the blessing part.
Absolutely.
Being the youngest, I was able to see what my sisters did, the mistakes they made, all the successes they had, and I was able to calibrate my life accordingly.
Right.
You know, they did that. So hopefully I don't have to go through that. With that being said, it's like, hey, I had to listen to my inner voice in a lot of different ways. And also, you know, you come in contact with folks such as yourself that encourage you to step outside the box. Sometimes you need that good friend to like egg you on a little bit. Sometimes you need that friend to get you hyped. Sometimes you need your friend to be like, listen, that's a dope idea. And if you don't explore it, I'm taking it. So you better explore it.
Right.
But I think for me, it was really, a lot of things were born out of adversity.
Okay.
So you have to be creative because, you know, it's born out of adversity. You don't have, so you have to create. And I think for me, the tension has always become, how do you survive and navigate this world that demands a lot from you without losing yourself and without being too demanding of others, right?
Absolutely.
And I think there's a tension there. And I think one of the most, I guess, poignant lessons that I've learned is the art of code switching. And I think that being in different environments, whether it's a predominantly white environment, whether it's a predominantly black environment, whatever the case may be, living in a state of double consciousness, that duality, there's an art to that. And I think you have to be creative in your code switching. You know, you can say, oh, how are you doing? Like, what's good? Like, there's a difference between that. You're forced to be creative. It's a different language.
Right.
It's really a different language. So that's part of it. The other part is learning from your mistakes and not being afraid to make mistakes. I think that's the other piece. And I think what I've learned now is, one, there's a difference between assimilation and acclimation. There's a difference between adopting and adapting.
Right.
And you have to find what works best for you. For me, it's adapting and it's acclimation. I'm not going to assimilate and I'm not going to adopt unless I think it's worth adopting in that sense, right?
Right.
That being said, you really have to be in touch with you. You have to be in touch with yourself. And sometimes it's the art of reflecting. And I think one of the best things I learned in college, and it's funny because I didn't learn it until senior year. I'm not saying my college experience is a waste. I'm just saying the best thing I learned in college came in my senior year. And it was how to be reflective. And that's something that I continue to have, and I carry it with me all the time. I use it in my work now when I'm working with students about how to craft their college essays. And it's about the art of reflecting. You ask yourself 3 essential questions. It's what, so what, and what now?
Okay.
And just having that as a reflective guideline allows you to think about your life. Like, what has your life meant? Then you tell me what your life meant. Okay, so what? Why is that important? Now that you know that, and you told me why it's important, what now? What's the next steps? So I think if we ask ourselves those 3 questions, we could be very creative if we allow ourselves time and space to do that, to really think about things. A lot of people might not know this about me. I know you do. But my last name is Yisrael. People either mistake me for a Russian ballet dancer, or you know, or some folks, like some of my students. I've had students come to my office expecting to see an old Jewish man, and they're like, "Oh, I'm looking for Mikael Yisrael. That's me.
Yeah, that's me.
Which is hilarious, but at the same time, I think about it, and now that I'm older, I appreciate it more so, because my mother's last name is Smith.
Okay.
And my father's last name is Brown.
Huh.
My last name is Yisrael. Now, without going into the deep story, I look at it as I was born free.
Ah.
In the sense of, like, my parents created my name. So why not be creative? Why not have that opportunity, like, accept that as my identity, and, like, use it as a platform and a purpose to be creative? With a name that rhymes like Mikael Yisrael, I gotta do something. I gotta be creative. I can't just sit there and be vanilla.
No.
You know? So I think that's where it really comes from. And I think I get bored easily.
Okay.
I take challenges and I see them as opportunities.
Excellent.
Not only for growth, but also for innovation.
Right.
I like to solve problems. And sometimes, you know, solving problems, that will really spark your creativity.
Sure does. And one of the things that I appreciate about you is that you're always willing to roll up your sleeves and solve a problem.
Hey.
However way you can, from your intellect, or even if it takes humor to break the ice, and you know, people who are trying to be too cool for school, and that humor can just instantly bridge the gap, and we can start collaborating, as opposed to instead of sizing each other up and be like, oh, I can use this to benefit me from there, as opposed to us coming together and benefiting as a whole.
It's funny you said it. One of my mentors, who was the president of my fraternity, like the national president of my fraternity, one of the advice or pieces of advice that he gave us was, no matter where you go, always have prepared a joke and a prayer.
Okay.
Because you're prepared for any occasion now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I did take that to heart. And I think you have to be able to be in touch with your audience. You have to be able to listen to what people say. And, as you know, me and you know as introverts, you have to listen to the things that people don't say.
Oh, yeah.
You have to read between the lines. You have to see the non-verbal cues, body language. And you can really have that emotional intelligence. And I think the more we can become in touch with the basic human instincts or the human activity that we do, the more and more we can really be creative or understand where people are coming from, even if we don't know who they are. And that's how you can probably like hit it off with somebody that you just met for the first time. Especially if you're keeping an open mind, especially if you're keeping an open heart, open eyes, open ears. You have to really tap into your senses.
In some instances, a lot of us are conforming to what we see, and not actually, as you brought up before brilliantly, is that we're not following our intuition. Because our intuition really steers us wrong, and usually has a great balance of doing what we want and doing what is best. And I think that's the best philosophy to take.
And it's awesome that you said that, particularly the part about choices, when you said, you know, making choices, that we need to realize that we have choices. Because it's funny, I was in my graduate program and I had to interview someone in a position that I can see myself being in.
Okay.
And I interviewed a man who unfortunately passed away last year. He told me, or earlier this year, he shared with me some information, and he said that he was the head of the upper school. And he said to me that when I asked him, what is your definition of education? What is your definition of pretty much what you do and what you try to instill in folks? He told me that knowledge is freedom.
Okay.
So the more knowledge you attain, the more freedom you have.
Right.
That's one. Number two, I also asked him, I said, what is your job on a daily basis? I know you're the head of the upper school, but what do you do? He said, I think education is really important in terms of teaching people how to make good choices. Ooh. And first and foremost, they have to realize what a choice is.
Right.
So what I boiled that down to is life, honestly, is about choices and consequences from those choices. If we don't know what a good choice is, then we make bad choices. If we don't know, even worse, that we have a choice to make, that's when we conform and just go along the path that's already been traveled, that's been most traveled, the one that we only think exists.
And in that instance, choices are made for us. So you're not exercising your right.
Exactly, exactly. So with that being said, it's really important to understand. That's what I try to do with my students, particularly when they think about the college process, or even when I'm in front of them teaching them in my classes that we have, is that you're empowered. You have empowerment in this process. You can take ownership and autonomy over your own educational journey, right? I'm not trying to spoon feed you. I might share things with you. If it's, something that you like, consume it. If it's something that you don't care for, if you think it's vegetables, if you think it's Brussels sprouts, whatever the case may be, then don't take it.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to force feed you. I'm just sharing things with you that I think are insightful. And if you don't think so, that's fine. But again, some folks don't think that. Some folks think this is what it is. This is the only way we'll ever be. Or some folks are just afraid to depart from that path. And the question is why?
That is a great question. And my follow-up question to that is that out of the people who say like that's not their cup of tea, how long have they digested on that thought before they establish that's not their cup of tea? Because one of the things we do as Creative Maestros is that we love to play with ideas in our imagination and look for every possible way for a positive outcome, because your imagination does that naturally. That's a divine gift that we all share, is that our imagination automatically comes up with a positive solution to a problem, as opposed to coming up with negative ideas that, oh, this won't work, that won't work because of X, Y, and Z. So what are the ways that it can work, and start from there. And then over time, the way, because I like to equate ideas as something solid and then parts that have holes that need to be filled in, which could be the negative parts. But then after spending time with your ideas, and then you can learn, over time you can see what parts you still need to be filled in. And then that's how you fully make your idea not only actionable, but also positive.
And it's funny that you said that, because I'm a fan. I've subscribed, and I've been watching your videos. With that being said, I think it was in one of your first video, and you said something to the effect of, if you think of something profound, write it down.
Please write it down.
Write it down.
Please write it down.
And to that point, I carry with me a little black book. And I write all my ideas that come to mind.
That's beautiful.
Because I think it was Einstein said, don't memorize something that you can look up.
Ooh, love it.
So I want to make sure that I'm not putting too much stress on my memory. So when I get that great idea, that profound idea, I'm going to write it down. And like you said, some ideas have holes in it. And sometimes, through a divine intervention, you might have something that's a foundation, but you don't have the other levels to it. And it might not be that season for it yet. So you have to put it down, and then maybe, think about it, let it sit in the incubator, let it marinate, and then all of a sudden other ideas start to come.
Absolutely.
So I keep that little black book, man. That's something I always go back through. And sometimes when you come back, like you set it and forget it, like them old infomercials, right? You set it and forget it, and then you just let it sit there, and you come back, and then you approach it with fresh eyes, fresh perspective. And by that time, you've probably grown a lot because you had different life experiences.
Right.
So you're approaching things differently, or you talk to different creative maestros, or whatever the case may be, right? And then you come back to it, and it's like, wow, I can take this idea to the next level. Or someone who I met might have that missing piece or that puzzle piece to help me take it to the next level. So it's important to write the things down, like you said, and make sure that you're fully, testing out these ideas or fleshing them out.
Absolutely. And one of the problems that I've struggled with is, especially in our society now, is patience. And writing the idea down elicits patience in yourself, because, as Mick said, it allows you to build on the idea over time. And so by the time you actually take action on the idea, it's well thought out, it's well polished, you see all avenues of adversary, so you know how to combat those things when they arise, and you're not caught off guard, because who wants to be caught off guard when it's something that you love doing? So spend time with what you love doing so you can see all the different avenues of possibility, and use your imagination to see how negative influences can come in and try to deter you from doing what you're doing, so you have an appropriate response for that. That doesn't add to the negativity added to your idea, but can turn it into a positive.
I couldn't agree more. I think patience is key, and more than just patience is practicing patience, because you're not going to just get it. Trust me. I know you come up with an idea, you're like, this joint about to pop. It's about to pop tomorrow. Then it doesn't. You're
Right.
like, all right, you going to roll with it? Or are you going to be patient? Are you going to put in that work? Are you going to put in that due diligence to make sure that you can really make this thing happen? And sometimes, because again, popcorn, microwave, they want things quick nowadays. So for the young maestros out there, right? The folks out there who are listening, I mean, like you said, man, patience is key, and it's a tough process. It's a tough process, particularly if you know your idea is great. Other folks know it's great. It's a tough process to just sit on a great idea and let it build. But it's better to let it build and release it when it's ready than release it when it's premature and then it just doesn't work.
That's very true. And what you said is even more important, is to eventually release the idea. Because how many of us are sitting on gold mines? Literal gold mines of ideas, and from whatever reason you don't get the encouragement for them. Maybe you're too shy to share them, but just know that you do have ideas that are gold. Remember that.
Yeah, and honestly, this is not hyperbole. He didn't pay me to say this. I'm being so serious. I talk about that black book, right? It's been in my work bag a lot of times. I often take it out. I write things down, but I haven't really done anything with it. I have a separate Instagram account that's not my own personal one, but it's for something I've been thinking about. And it's just been sitting there. You always have a million excuses of why it's not sitting there. But when I started watching that Creative Maestro channel, brother, I'm telling you, and I'm not even joking, I'm telling you, it really sparked and ignited that imagination, that creativity that I've been missing, honestly. And sometimes you get into the whole monotony of, routine of, because as humans, we're creatures of habit. You wake up, you go to work, you come back, you do what you got to do. And you don't really have time for creativity. Or your mind tells you don't have time for creativity. Or your body tells you don't have time for creativity. Or the world tells you don't have time for creativity. So I appreciate this platform that you are putting out there to everyone else, because it's very, very inspiring. And I think it's very timely right now.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So as a young maestro growing up, what would you say some of the moments of conformity that you encountered that you were able to sidestep or moonwalk past?
It's funny. Even if you think about uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
Now, uniforms have pros and cons.
Right.
For people who don't have as much money, rock the same thing to school every day. Right. You don't have to worry about wearing name brands, whatever the case may be. But I think uniforms was something that we had to conform to. There's goods and there's a bad thing there. But I think some of the more creative folks would wear their uniform a different way.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Some folks might have their pants sagging. Some folks might have their shirt unbuttoned at the top. They might pop their collar. So right. I think that's when you start to see who's going to conform and who's not.
Right.
When it came to doing math problems, for example, there's a way you're supposed to do it. There's a way you're supposed to show your work. But there were ways I would always do it differently, or try to find another way to solve it, because that's a challenge to me.
Right.
When it was time for creative assignments, such as or whether you're writing a paper or if you have to do a diorama or whatever the case may be, I always try to challenge myself to think outside the box and think about, what are some of my classmates going to do? I'm not doing that. I'm going to try to do something different. And even if I got a bad grade, I wanted to try to be different. So I think challenge myself to be different and just not produce the same thing that other people are producing. Not because it's wrong, per se, but because I want to challenge myself to do something different, something creative, something original. And I think that allowing yourself to, one, be in a position where you could possibly fail, but two, be in a position where you can explore and give yourself that freedom of expression, I think that's very important.
And it's a great point, because it literally hones on to what we started the conversation with, describing you as a scientific artist. Because essentially when you're being creative and you put yourself out there and you share it, you're experimenting. You're experimenting how you succeed or fail. You're experimenting to see how people respond to your creativity. So I think it's definitely a great tool to grow, not only as a person, not only as a creative maestro, but as a person who wants to stand out and actually show who you are, as opposed to hiding who you, not necessarily hiding, but reserving who you are until you're more comfortable putting yourself out there like that. Because essentially you're just putting yourself out there, so it doesn't really matter if you're comfortable or not, because at the end of the day you believe in the content that you're putting out.
For sure. And it's funny because I'm thinking back of like some of my elementary school assignments that we had to do. And it was one that was like, you had to come up with an invention.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, all right, what am I going to come up with? I came up with a couple of things. So I'll tell you about one time in elementary school, then I'll tell you another time about middle school. So elementary school, we had to come up with an invention. I was like, all right, what am I going to come up with? So I used to watch TV a lot. And what pissed me off or made me upset, what really grinded my gears, was when the remote would be misplaced. Because, you know, back in the day, you had to get up,
Right.
turn on the cable box, turn on the TV, adjust the antenna. So I used to be upset when the remote was gone. So for my creative innovation, what I did was I created something called the remote control necklace.
Oh!
So we throw a Flavor Flav, had a clock around his neck,
You
you
had
got
a
a remote
remote.
around your neck. You know what I mean? So that way, when you're watching TV, boom. So that way you got it, and you just put it back where you want. So it was, of course, juvenile, but at the same time, it's like, that's me thinking outside the box.
Right.
I'm not going to lose this remote again. We watching TV tonight.
Problem solving.
Problem solving. So it's like, okay, here's a remote control necklace. And when I was younger, so my initials, Mikael Yisrael, my initials are MY, don't have a middle name. So when I was in middle school, we had to come up with another thing. And we had to present it in Spanish. So it was a Spanish project. First, we had one thing where we couldn't do rap lyrics. So I did Fabulous, Holla Back, Youngin. Grita me joven. But anyway, we also did something where we had to create an invention. So mine was a clothing line.
Oh.
And it was called My Jeans.
MY.
And I used to say, my jeans make them yours. So that was the tagline. So I think I was always trying to think outside the box. My issue is that, you know, I would sit on these ideas, put them on a little black book, and that's still happening today, until I get inspired or pushed a little further to actually turn these ideas into actual creations.
So as someone in the educational field, what are the ways that you try to spark that innovation in young minds?
I make people talk.
Oh, I like that.
I make them talk. I think some folks might get into the, I'm the teacher, I'm the person who has all the answers, so I'm going to fill silence with my words.
The title, yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
We will sit in awkward silence until you speak. You will actually have to open your mouth and say something that comes from your psyche, your creative mind. You're going to have to speak. So I think there's a lot of times when we have conversations, when I have a conversation with a student, I'm like, listen, I want you, like with the college process, for example, I tell them all the time, listen, we are in a car together.
Okay.
I'm in the passenger seat. You're in the driver's seat. You're driving this thing. This is your show. You have complete autonomy. You have complete power.
Love
now,
that
of course, I will be your GPS.
Right.
I'll make sure you don't miss certain turns. I'll make sure you're on the right road. Watch out for that speed bump. Make sure you slow down. Speed up.
Watch out for the cop trap.
Watch out for the cop trap. But this is your show.
Right.
You're driving this thing. So I want to allow folks to understand that they have more power than they think they have, or they have more power than people have told them. Right?
The power to choose.
The power to choose. The power to have impact on where they're going to go, what they're going to do, who they're going to become, as opposed to being, I guess, told or dictated, you have to go here, you have to do this is what you have to do. So we ask fundamental questions, like, why do you even want to go to college? What is college? And it might seem very, like, meta or, you know, existential, but in a lot of different ways, it's like, no, let's really have those conversations. I really want to know. Is it because someone told you that's the next step? Or is that something you really want to do? Let's talk about it. Let's explore it a little bit more. And just forcing them to talk and giving them the platform and letting them know, listen, the stuff that's about to come out your mouth is important to me. So it should be important to you.
Yeah.
So giving them that platform, if you will, to speak out on their own behalf, as opposed to me saying, this is what the expert says. I don't want to do that.
I actually really love that because it reminds me of Dr. Boyce Watkins and his advice to actually have a plan before you go to college. Don't just go to college because everyone else is going to college. Actually have a plan before you go. Now, if you want to be an entrepreneur, know that most colleges and universities don't teach people to be entrepreneurs. They actually teach you to be workers. So if that's what you want to do, please keep that in mind. Now, if you want to be a professional like a doctor or a lawyer or a judge someday, then sure, you're going to have to go to college to achieve those things. But at the end of the day, like you said, you're going to have to do what you really want to do. And sometimes you don't know that until you get into college. So for people who, I guess, not necessarily late bloomers, they're just taking their time and considering their options and the avenues which they can explore, how can they, and at that level, that collegiate level, use their individuality to make the right decisions that don't lead them to, I guess, failure, which is what I feel like we're all consciously worried about, is we don't want to make the wrong decision that has us under a rock for most of our lives.
For sure. You have to be intentional about seeking help. You have to be intentional about being a self-advocate. You have to be intentional about inquiring, what needs to be done to get to where you want to be. And you have to have an open, honest conversation with yourself, because the reality might be that you have to do this, that, and the third in order for you to get to this place that you want to be.
Right.
If you have an issue with that, then maybe that's not where you want to be. Because if you really wanted to be there, you wouldn't have an issue with that.
Right.
So that's number one. Check that. Two, I think it's really important for you to really sit down and spend time with yourself again and be reflective. And then three, you have to somehow shut out the noise from folks who don't mean anything to you. So you have your parents, you have your close friends, you have your mentors, like listen to them. But the folks that have nothing to do with your life or your success and they're not helping you, they're not being supportive, like you have to find a way to block that out.
Especially if they're only literally judging you on superficial aspects, then you don't need to listen to them.
You're absolutely right, because honestly, they're going to steer you down the wrong path. Or they're going to make you second guess yourself. Ooh. And then that's when doubt creeps in. And then that's when you start to have this whole downward spiral, and then you're already lost. You've already lost it. So I think when you're in that space, you have to be vulnerable enough and humble enough to seek help, seek counsel, people who you trust, to give you a different opinion. You can't surround yourself with yes men and yes women. You can't. You have to surround yourself with people who are going to be like, listen, I love you, but that's a wild idea, and you need to think about that before you do it.
Right.
Or I love you, but you really want to go to this school after you've been to this school for so many times? You've been here for years, and now you just want to go to this community college? Well, what was the purpose of you going here? Why? So really asking those deep questions, really thinking about what's the end goal? What's my purpose? And then once you start to have those open, honest conversations, not only with yourself but with other people, then you'll probably have a little bit more of a clearer view of what steps you need to take.
I could definitely see that, because one of the things that propelled me through life is embracing being different. and in a world who rewards people for being the closest carbon copy to someone else, I mean, that's, to me, I never really wanted to do that. I always embraced being different. I love being weird. I prefer to be weird. Like, people think I'm weird for doing this, but I love it because it's me. I'm completely weird. I'm completely a dork, but I'm also an intellectual, creative, scientist, artist that allows, other people to not only embody that energy, but also take it and make it their own. And I think that's very important. It's like one of the main things about Creative Maestro is it's never about me. It's about the artist, which I think is incredibly important, because when a lot of artists get mentors or, students get teachers and professors that they really link with, they try to follow their path as opposed to creating your own. So it kind of reminds me of Bruce Leroy when he needs to realize that he's the master. He's got the glow. You guys got the glow. You got the glow. Thank you, Barry Gordon. Y'all got the glow. And that's incredibly important, because all it is a mental switch, just like that, and you've got it. And you just need to have not only the confidence and the belief, but understanding that your life has prepared you for this moment.
And it's crazy. I mean, not the harp or on the whole the glow issue, but when you reach that upper level, your mind, body, and soul must become one.
Absolutely.
And I think and that's how you really know that, you know, your creativity is taking you in the right direction. When all those things are in alignment, when all those things are congruent, you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And others know that too. So if I'm watching the Creative Maestro channel and I feel that, I know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. If I don't feel that, it's like, yo, what this man trying to do? So I think it's really about being honest, being open, listening, talking to people, and just really making yourself prepared to receive from people that you really trust. And even listen to the naysayers and haters. See what they're saying, because within their hate, there might be some truth.
Right.
There might be, but again, you have to have that discernment. You have to have that counsel around you to understand what you take and what you don't take. Because a lot of times, folks are always fed with the "you can't do it, you can't do this, you know, you're bad, you're terrible, you have to do this, you can't do that." You have to really sit down and talk with people who you really trust. And understand that, guess what? There's not just one way to do this thing. Or maybe you don't have to do that. Maybe this is another alternative option that you can take. So just being well learned or learned in a particular field, whatever it is, whether it's going to college, whether it's cooking meals, whether it's writing a book, whether it's starting a channel, whatever, like you have to vet a number of different things. Because as Meek Mill said, there's levels to this.
As a creative maestro yourself, who are some of the people that inspire you the most out there right now?
Oof. Black Thought from the Roots.
Okay.
J. Cole, Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West.
Who you met?
Woo! Intellectual crush.
Yeah.
For real. And also a brother of mine, Alpha Phi Alpha, shout out. Dr. Boyce Watkins.
Right.
Had the fortune of knowing his brother, Lawrence Watkins.
Oh, okay.
He was at the Johnson School at Cornell while I was there, and I met him while I was working in the library, you know.
Wow.
So that was fantastic. So, who else? And then folks that there's folks that I've met on my intellectual educational journey.
Like Dr. Umar.
So Dr. Umar, he's another person who's in my thought portfolio.
Right.
Because again, you know, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And some things might not be palatable to certain folks. But I think that even in an idea that might seem so radical or so crazy, you can find something that speaks to you. And then you can package it, or you can find some nuance in it that really speaks to you, so you can speak to other people who might agree with you or might disagree with you. So I think those are some of the folks. And then people along the way, just thinking about the places that I've been. Think about John Green. You know, a mentor. You think about Eric Treats, a mentor.
Absolutely.
Richard Malley. Think about some folks that I've met. Travis Gosa, Professor Travis Gosa at Cornell. Think about James Turner, another Dr. James Turner at Cornell. There's a number of different folks who I would say were my intellectual fathers, or either father figures throughout my life for a number of different reasons. And then there's a lot of other folks too, man. There's some dope folks as well. I mean, my wife's an inspiration in a lot of different ways too, for so many different reasons. I'm more introverted in nature. She's super extroverted, and I think she's really pushed me and propelled me to speak out more. She's like, yeah, you got great ideas and you have something to say, but you're not saying it. Why not? Be a little bit more bold. Speak your truth. So she's been a huge influence. So if I had to say anyone in particular, she's been a huge influence.
And I said it earlier, like I definitely have seen it. Like I've seen her influence on you, but I've also seen your influence on her. So now she is thinking about what she says before she says it.
No, for sure.
Which, you know, for some extroverts, they just blurt out whatever they want without even thinking about it, which is fine. We love you. We appreciate you.
But you need it in this world too.
Yeah. Right.
No, but I mean, I'm sure there's so many people that I can name, but I'm inspired, and then there's just random people too. I mean, I've already said this, but you too, man. Like honestly, like for real, in terms of being an inspiration, in a lot of different ways. Whether it's just conversations that we have off camera, whether it's conversations we have on camera, just all the time. Every time we touch base or talk about something, it could be about anything. It could be about art. It could be about rap. It could be about the news. It could be about net neutrality. Whatever the case may be, it's always a different perspective, or we can go deeper. So I think just having those type of opportunities, those experiences, have been huge inspirations for me. And there's so many role models. You just gotta take a little bit from everybody. Everybody should have at least 5. They should have at least 5.
It's a great point. What's the saying that you're usually a collection of your 5 closest people?
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest point that you basically talked about was being open-minded to those influences. Because how many of us are closed off if they don't have a PhD attached to their name or millions of Instagram followers to their portfolio? And sometimes you won't listen to certain people because they don't have those, those superficial acclimates, basically.
For real. And we have to get out of that whole rut of just looking for credentials or credential seeking. I mean, if you jive with someone and you believe what they're saying is true, then you should listen to it. It doesn't matter if they have letters after their name. It's fine. It's almost just like name brands. It's like, oh, you're not wearing name brand. Like last time I checked, Fruit of the Loom is the name brand.
Right.
You might not like it, but it's a brand on there. Right? Like it's a brand. So it's just interesting how folks try to downplay things that they might not agree with, or downplay things that are not conforming.
Like Big Baller Brand.
There you go. There you go. And that is exactly what we need to be careful of, to make sure that we're not trying to ostracize someone or something because it doesn't fit the mold of what you're accustomed to.
Right. And at the end of the day, the mold is there to basically categorize yourself. So, Yeah.
It's very true. It's very true. And I always tell my students too, because we talk about colleges, right? Like I said, college counselor. We're talking about colleges, and the culture of the school that I'm at is it's only these 25 colleges or universities that exist in the world. Fam, there's over 3,000. And if you're talking about the world, there's even more, right?
There's 75 just in the Boston area.
Exactly. So what are you talking about? But because there's a culture that breeds this type of hyper sensitivity to name or household brands, or somebody wants to get a hoodie or a sweatshirt that says a certain school, or they want to put on their bumper sticker on their car, they want to get a decal so they can show it off to their friends at the yacht club, whatever the case may be.
Right.
You don't have to go to that school to get a sweatshirt. Go buy one. You can get one online. Get it on the internet. You don't have to go there, and that's not going to define you. That's not going to say what your worth is. So don't put too much stock in that type of stuff. Again, you have to think about who you are and what's your best fit. And like I always say, people are like, what do you mean best fit? I'm like, well, think about it. Right? If you think about it like in terms of shoes, right? Every time I go, I know I wear a size 12. So when I go shopping, I can just pull a 12 off the rack, right? And then I know it's going to fit me. However, I've learned that Nikes run small.
Okay.
So my thing is, I always tell folks you need to find the right fit, so you have to try things on for size. Now you can listen to everyone saying, oh, Nike might be the best basketball shoe, Adidas, Under Armour, whatever the case may be. But you have to try things on for size, because if I think Nike is the best basketball shoe, if I don't try it on, it might be hurting my feet when I'm playing ball, when Adidas or Under Armour might have been better. But I never tried them on because I was told that Nike's the best basketball sneaker. The NBA has showed me that, oh, I got to wear this one. Or if I like Kevin Durant, I'm like, oh, I got to rock with that. If I like Steph Curry, I got to rock the Under Armour. You know what I mean? So with that being said, you have to be very mindful of what you're consuming. You have to be very mindful of what people are telling you. And you have to do your research, do your due diligence, because otherwise, again, you'll be an excellent sheep.
It's true, and I know from experience that, and usually in the boardroom of these corporations, they refer to people as worker bees. So they just look at us as opportunities to control and influence to their benefit. So when we do something that LeVar Ball is doing, it totally messes with their dynamics and their bottom line. So it's very interesting to see how the corporate world is responding to people like LeVar Ball, or even LeBron James. Even though he has a lifetime deal with Nike, what he's doing with his deal is different than anyone else has done with their deal. Looking at people like Michael Jordan, he's doing different things than Michael Jordan has ever done with his deal.
Which is very true, and it's like, and that's why I have hope.
Okay.
Hope for the future.
Which is important.
Can I say I'm optimistic? History has shown, but I have hope for the future. With a lot of folks who are coming up who are being a little bit more conscious in this moment. Because, for me, like, God has a way of making things align for certain moments, and certain moments become movements, right? So we have to listen and be in tune with that. But I think the younger generation now is being made privy to the fact that there's so much injustice and things taking place in the world, or there's some things that might not really jive with their spirit. So they're being raised in this moment. I just hope that it becomes a movement. Because again, just like my little black book, that's just a moment. Now, if I don't turn it into a movement, that might be a problem. So folks might be powerful right now, and they might just be talking about, oh yeah, this, that, and the third, but if they don't make it into a movement. But I'm hopeful, because I think folks like LeBron James, folks like Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, folks like Colin Kaepernick, they're really showing that they have power. They're really showing that it's okay to break the mold. Now, don't get it twisted. There might be consequences and repercussions. You have to be willing to take them risks.
But they're exercising their
But they're exercising that power. They're exercising their right to choose. They're exercising their right to do what they want to do, not what they're told to do.
And which is why I never really understand, because again, as a former athlete, my side is always going to be with the players.
Mm-hmm.
So people go to a 9 to 5 and get told what to do. Essentially like how owners tell players what to do,
mm-hmm.
and yet they always side with the owners and be like, oh, the players are this and that, they're spoiled brats, when a lot of them have started at socioeconomic levels lower than they did, and now they're higher than them, and now they're spoiled brats.
It's funny how that works, right? I liken it to, it's almost like a frat culture in some ways, or like the senior who's hazing the freshman, but they were also hazed when they were a freshman.
Right.
And when they were a freshman, they're like, oh my gosh, I hate being hazed. I will never do this. I would never do this to anybody. This is crazy. And then the minute they become a senior, they're hazing freshmen. Like, how does that work? What happens in between freshman year to senior year?
That's a great question.
What happens? What are you told? Or are you just following the path that people put in front of you? But who's going to be that brave person to break the mold? Colin Kaepernick.
Or you. One of the best ways to learn different things is, as you discuss, speaking to different people. Mm-hmm. Because when you experience different cultures, you learn to think in different ways. Because I think one of the ways that stifles creativity is having a one-track mind. So let's say you only listen to pop music, or you only listen to hip-hop, then you're only going to think in that way. If you listen to both, if you listen to alternative music, if you listen to music that has no words, then it allows your creative pathways to open in so many different ways that you'll come up with ideas that you never thought were possible. And that's only because of the type of music you're listening to. But that doesn't just have to do with music. It can be with the type of film, the type of news you consume. So as creative maestros, I feel like it's our responsibility, because we're able to see things in different ways. It's important to intake information differently as it comes, because we're able to handle it, as opposed to other people who take the easier path, which is to follow.
And I couldn't agree more with that. I think that we need to learn how to train ourselves to be students of the liberal arts. And when I was working in higher education, folks used to always ask me, how would you describe the liberal arts, right? And it was funny because it came to me, because I could easily say, well, the liberal arts is actually, like, that's whack. So I'm like, okay, let me think about this. So I was watching Netflix one day, and I was watching the 30 for 30 documentary on Bo Jackson. You don't know Bo.
Right.
And everyone knows Bo Jackson. Freaking amazing athlete who played multiple sports. It was just phenomenal, like a dominant force of nature, particularly as an athlete. And with that being said, he was the first person to get a cross-training shoe. Wow. So he was an athlete who got a cross-training shoe because he played football, he played baseball, he could run really fast. So he got a cross-training shoe with Nike, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Nike. So I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, so what do cross-trainers do? And you know, there's this huge wave that's called CrossFit. And it's CrossFit training, right? And I was like, what does he do? So he's exercising different muscles. Right. You know, because, you know, basketball, you do one thing. Football, you do one thing. Baseball, you do one thing. Basketball, soccer, you're always exercising different muscles. So he was a CrossFit trainer in order for him to be healthy and all to activate different muscles. So I said, liberal arts is intellectual CrossFit training.
Oh, I like that.
That's what it is. So I would challenge all of us, creative maestros out there, I would challenge you to be an intellectual CrossFit trainer. So really utilize all the different muscles in your mind. That means exploring different disciplines. I don't care if you're not interested in humanity. So if you're interested in social sciences or not, you have to find the connection and the intersection in all of them. And I would challenge folks to do that because it's so easy to study the things you're interested in. It's harder to study things you're not interested in, but you might find something in the stuff that you're not interested in that really sparks and takes you to the next level in the stuff that you are interested in. So we have to be intellectually CrossFit trained.
That's a wonderful metaphor. Please, guys, write that down. Please write that down. And that actually reminds me of a Leonardo da Vinci quote, which says, realize that everything connects to everything else.
Wow.
So he was a big observer of nature, and a lot of his work was reverse engineered from creation. So he would see all the different attributes of nature and how, from the simple aspect of birds flying, and then he would reverse engineer a flying machine off of that. So it's just one of those things where you really have to be a scientist and dive into some of these subjects for your inner artist to flourish.
That's very true. And sometimes you need that other piece that's going to unlock your potential in this one area. So you have some artists who might be, having writer's block.
Right.
Or they can't really get a record to sound right. The next thing you know, they're listening to something else that they would never listen to. Or next thing you know, they're reading something that they would never read before. And all of a sudden they have that eureka moment. It's like, oh, I've got it. So you really have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and really step outside of your comfort zone to a point where you're still feeling in a safe space, but safe enough for you to take a risk and challenge yourself, to push yourself further, because you won't realize how much you're capable of until you try to take that leap.
It's true, and similar to Nasheed, you kind of have to be a creative risk taker.
Yes.
And you actually reminded me of something that I said in terms of how the world looks down upon people who are vulnerable, but when you're an artist and you're vulnerable and you make something magnificent, they all want to praise you. So it's kind of that duality in terms of, okay, I don't want to be vulnerable because I'll appear weak, but your greatest strength is being vulnerable and being comfortable with your vulnerability, and that's where the best aspect of yourself comes out, because you basically say, you know what, I'm just going to go for it, I'm going to express how I feel, and I'm not going to second guess it.
And that whole piece of vulnerability, I think one of the best albums ever created, and of course I can't really speak on that topic because of my age. I don't know, and I don't profess to know all of the music that's ever been created. However, from my humble opinion, I would say that one of the greatest records ever made was The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill.
Ooh.
Period. That's why it's been highly touted. That's why it's been inducted into a number of different museums or Hall of Fames and things of that nature. And I think the reason why I bring it up is because I think she made herself so vulnerable, and it was a double-edged sword.
Right.
It was a double-edged sword, because she made herself so vulnerable that she created this beautiful masterpiece of art that speaks to everyone. But at the same time, particularly as a woman of color, she made herself so vulnerable that maybe she might have boxed herself into a place that she couldn't really recover from, or maybe she made herself so vulnerable to the point that she couldn't rebound from that. So I think true beauty and true art comes from making yourself very, very vulnerable. But then the question comes back to the reflection, right? What now? So what do you do after something that great? And sometimes, it's hard to be creative if you just created something so great. Right. Because you might be in competition with yourself. So if I just release this amazing album, I've already put myself up here. So people are expecting what now?
Even
something
better.
Up here.
Yeah.
And that's tough. And some people find they fall into a rut, and they might get upset, or they might get depressed, or they might start to act out and lash out. And I don't know what the remedy is for that. But I think that once you make yourself vulnerable, that album shows you truly how art and beauty can come from just making yourself vulnerable, speaking the truth, and putting yourself in a space to be judged in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we do have to become comfortable with over time. It is a process, just like how art is a process. A willingness to allow yourself to be judged is also a process. And I would say the more comfortable you are with yourself, the better. The more, but more importantly, the more you believe in what you are producing, it's even easier to take on that judgment, because you won't really. I'm not gonna say you won't care what people have to say. That you'll listen to it and you'll respect what people have to say, because again, you might find some constructive criticism, like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Next time I'm creating, I'm gonna consider that. But you believe in what you're saying, so you're not taking anything back. You meant everything you said, and you meant everything you did and created, which I think is very important.
I think it's very important too, and it's funny because I think positive thinking is very important.
Oh yes.
I think confidence is very important, but I also think humility is very important. So I think if on my Instagram, in my bio, I'll put, I live on the corner of confidence and humility.
I love that.
In a house built on faith.
Yes.
And with that being said, sometimes you have to be your own fan, or at least your number one fan.
Yes.
You have to be your own cheerleader, right? And almost to a borderline of arrogance, but that's where the humility comes in. So you have to have your confidence and your humility. That's why you have some people who will say, I think it was Lawrence Watkins actually, so Dr. Boyce Watkins' brother, he gave a talk when I was at Cornell, and he said, the whole idea of humble arrogance, and how you have to, in order for you to propel yourself forward, in order for you to be a strong entrepreneur, in order for you to chase a dream that people say is not worth chasing or say that you can't attain, you have to have that humble arrogance.
Right. Because
you have enough space for you to be vulnerable and understand that you don't have all the answers, but you also have that confidence that's pushing you forward if no one else does.
That's incredibly powerful, because being a creative maestro is all about self-belief and self-confidence. And if you don't have that when you're creating, you're not going to be compelled to share what you created with the world. So you need that. It's like you said, it's the perfect balance. You need the vulnerability, but you also need the confidence. And right in the middle is humility. So you'll be open-minded to the conductive criticism when it comes in, but you'll have enough hubris, for lack of better words, to put it out there, like a Kanye West, and not care what people say, because that's what you honestly believe in. For sure.
And Kanye, man, talk about Kanye, a genius.
Yes.
A genius, and I know he's had his fall from grace.
Sure.
For a number of different reasons, but if you look at some of his earlier work, you look at some of the things he's produced, not just his own albums, I'm talking about records he's produced for other people, just masterful. And I think, again, he might have been in the Lauryn Hill space,
right,
where he made himself too vulnerable, or vulnerable beyond, and he exposed too much, or maybe, whenever you make yourself too vulnerable, or whenever you make yourself vulnerable, and beware of this, whenever you make yourself vulnerable, there are some folks who will prey on that.
Right.
There are some folks who will seize that as an opportunity and exploit that. Whether it's a company or whether it's people. Like just some of your friends, whatever the case may be. But be very mindful of that. So you have to keep your eyes open, your ears open, and your heart open too when you're making yourself vulnerable in the sense of creating art and just trying to get the best out of you.